Well, hello and welcome yet again. I'd first like to start this video by saying that I completely screwed up when I purchased this because I had thought this was going to fit on a pick rail. It does not. This is designed for a specific plate mounted for, I believe, a Trijicon RMR mount for a slider for a pistol. So this isn't going to be mounted properly in any such way, shape, or form, but nevertheless, let's kick it off by going over some of the greatest features about HoloSuns. As you can see, I'm already playing around with it. It's auto brightness mode. Cover it up with your hand, or shine a really bright flashlight on top, or simulating going outside during a bright day or going into a dark environment. It automatically changes brightness to the reticle seamlessly and very efficiently. It's beautiful. Another nice thing that the HoloSuns have are their shake awake options. You can set it from as low as, I believe, 10 minutes to as high as a couple hours. I set it for 10 minutes, walked away, came back, and as you can see, it really doesn't take that much to set this thing off. That's part of the reason why these things are rated for around 10,000 hours battery life, because the shake awake means the reticle is never on all the time, and the solar panel is constantly charging this thing up when you're in bright enough light to actually do so. Alright, with going over some of the basic features, let's see how this thing actually looks in the environment. So I have this currently mounted where it would be mounted on a carbine. I do play around with switching up to where it's going to be mounted on a pistol, where a lot of you are going to be buying this and mounting it at. Just so you have an idea, from the camera to the scope, it's about 15.5, 16 inches, so take that for what it's worth and see how well it works for you. Now, I was really excited to buy one of these because I love the fact that it's enclosed just like the HoloSun 512 that I bought off of Scott. That was my main complaint with the 510 and my main complaint with the EOTechs. However, the glass in this thing, as you're probably noticing right now, above the reticle has a lot of distortion. You also see a very fair amount of tinting, which I know why they do it. It's so that you can pick up the reticle easier and save a little bit on battery life. But this thing's rated for so high on your battery life, plus with the red dot, it's like, why even bother doing it at that point? Another nice feature, which I didn't talk about or showcase already, is that you can change this from a dot to the circle dot like you've been seeing throughout this entire video. Shifting it side to side, you can see that the dot does shift off target at about 400 yards. But keep in mind, that's going to do that from any distance. So if you're not perfectly lined up behind this, you could have the possibility of not hitting exactly where you want. So definitely keep that in mind. Shifting the red dot forward, like where you'd have it mounted on a pistol or thereabouts, we're going to pan across the tree line and you're going to see just how much fisheyeing this thing really has. The farther away it is, the more pronounced it's going to be because the smaller the viewport's going to be when you're looking through it. It's something that once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. And I know I'm going to be really harsh on this thing because a lot of the micro reflexes that I've reviewed in the past have had those issues before, but for some reason with this, it seems like it's a little bit more pronounced. Again, going side to side, it's a little bit harder to see, but the reticle is shifting side to side, and you get a much better sense of just how much warping there is on the outer edges of the lens. It's really quite severe, and in person, it's much worse. Don't worry, Magnified fans, I got you. You're taking a look through the Primary Arms Gen 4 Long Eye Relief 3X magnifier, which is fantastically clear. Look at that image. Basically, picture perfect. You can't ask for much better. How does this thing look like when magnified? Well, you're going to find out really soon. And I'm not delighted to say it's good, because in my opinion, it's not. So if you're planning on buying this thing and throwing it on a carbine, like I've talked about and showcased already, and magnifying it, expect it to not be that great of an image. Here's where you could really see the difference between the bottom half, or the bottom 2/3 at the reticle and just below, and then above it. Also note, the reticle doesn't ever look that sharp. To the naked eye, without it being magnified, it's a little bit hard to see it being razor sharp, but when magnified, you can clearly see that it is fuzzy around the edges. And that's really not that great, especially when you factor in the price, because it's one thing if this thing was 200 bucks, but this thing normally retails for a little bit over $400 on Amazon at all times. That's a lot of money, and we're going to talk about that more in the final thoughts about what it really costs to own one of these things, but more on that later. Right now, just look at how much distortion there is at the top half of this image. That mixed in with the tint and the blurry reticle, for me, having all three of those, It's unacceptable for the price. I'm sorry, but I'm not enthusiastic about this whatsoever. Alright, so let's take it out of a static environment and throw it in a dynamic one. And while we're doing it, let me talk about another great thing that HOLOSUN gets right, the brightness. There's 11 settings, 1 to 11, and 11 is ridiculously bright. If I had it magnified at 11 in a slightly darker environment, you'd probably go blind from it, which I love, absolutely love, because you'll always have it be bright enough in any situation that you might encounter to have it be visible and usable. And that is priceless. Another positive to this and HoloSun is the build quality. Not only does it look really, really good in hand, but it feels fantastic. The finishes are all top notch. The buttons, the controls, the windage and elevation controls are all top notch.
Pew 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 pew.
And it really goes to make it feel like it's worth $430. Now, I know it sounds like I'm bashing on this thing, but there are some drawbacks that for me are a problem. The tint I can live with,
Pew 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 pew.
though I don't necessarily understand why they would ever need to put so much tint on an object like this where the battery life is as stellar as it is and as high as the brightness gets.
Pew 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 pew.
It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense to me. The fuzzy reticle is only if you're going to be magnifying it. It doesn't look the sharpest to the naked eye, but unless you're really looking for it, you'll probably never even notice it. Now, hands down, the biggest detriment that this optic has for me is also the most obvious one, and it's the distortion. Whether you have it mounted like we had it on as a carbine or here like a pistol, it's always there, and there's no getting away from it. For me, it's extremely distracting. For you and for some others that I know, they say that they like it and it works for them. And that's great. Like I said already, if you have one of these and you like it, good. I'm not trying to disprove you and say this is the worst red dot ever. Never buy this. But it is something that if you're not expecting it to be there, you're going to be in for a shock. For me, the be all end all of a reflex is an EOTech because one, there's zero tinting to the glass. Two, there is zero distortion to the glass. And three, the reticles are sharp, at least on the XPS22 that I had reviewed many, many moons ago. It was always just so fantastic. And it way better than the UH1 as well.
No pew pew.
No pew pew, I'm sorry. But I'm happy to report that at least the UH1 Gen 2, which Sparks was so nice enough to send over, might have fixed all of that. Alright, so let's mount it back where we'd have this roughly as a carbine and see how this thing looks at a known distance, 50 yards, at my home away from home. If you can't notice how much warping there is to the glass here, then I'm sorry to report, but you need to go see an ophthalmologist and get your eyes checked. Because when we pan across from side to side, look at how much all those the paper targets, pull up from the side down to the middle and then back up to the side. And look at the very top. It's all over the place. One great thing about at least HoloSuns or any sort of reflex like this is, as long as you're roughly behind it, the reticle is going to remain mostly on target. Like I showcased earlier, it will have a shift to it, but for the most part, it is going to stay where you need it. On a larger target, that's a zero issue, but on a very small target, it's something to be mindful of. Here's a fun little test because it really speaks volume when you have it in front of you and the camera is rigid and you move it around and it really just distorts everything. It's hilarious in my opinion. To me, it seems like the 509 is struggling a little bit, I have to be honest. And I'm really curious to see how the two biggest competitors to this thing are by comparison, both the Aimpoint Acro and the Steiner MRS, both of which only come in at about 50% more expensive to a little bit less. Honestly, for the price,
Pew pew.
I would love to see how those compare to this. One last section, pistol mount,
Pew pew.
just showcasing a little bit darker environment with the brighter reticle,
Pew pew.
both of the dot and the circle dot, before I let you go enjoy a little bit of ambiance before my final thoughts.
Pew pew.
So, here we are. From the tone of my voice from this entire video, you might have been able to tell that I don't particularly care for this. And no, it's not because I was only going to be mounting this on a carbine when I first initially bought it. Oh no. I still don't like two major things. One, the reticle doesn't look clear, especially when magnified. And two, the top half of the image, it's horrible. It's blurry and it's magnified and with bad fisheye. It's got everything wrong with it for the top. Okay, I'll call it the top third of the image. Now, if you're using this on a pistol, again, I don't think it's great. But that's only my opinion on the matter. You might think this is fantastic, in which case, I hope you buy one. I hope you love it. Truly. I'm not trying to start a fight here or upset anybody. Let's get into a couple of reasons why, other than just the reticle and the fisheyeing. Well, first off, it's not that light, all things considered. Now, if you're using this on a pistol, you're going to need the optic, and you're going to need the base plate. A little bit over 3.4 ounces. That might not sound too bad, but what happens if you're using this on a carbine? Well, you're going to have to take that 2.3-ish ounce weight and add an American Defense mount, or something similar to it. The American Defense mount comes in 3 heights, low, medium, high, with a weight of 1 ounce, 2.3, and 2.4 ounces respectively. They come in at around $90, and this little guy right here goes on a regular price of around $430 on Amazon, link in the description below. You can find these on sale for under $400, but let's say you pay $400, you get a $30 discount on this, you still have to buy a $90 mount to be able to use this on a carbine. You're talking about $500, and that's a lot of money. I don't care who you are. Not only that, but let's say you want to go with one of the larger mounts, which is 2.3 or 2.4 ounces. You're talking about just shy of 5 ounces for this guy. When you can buy this for less money than that, if you can even find one of these available, and just shy of 4 ounces heavier. Now, I bring this into the equation for a couple of reasons. Yes, this is heavier. No, it does not have a quick release mount, but it's still, number one, functions the same, and it gives you a much better view through the optic. Also note the lack of tinting, which is something I personally really, really like. It's already got the height that you might be looking for, and it's already going to mount to your pick rail. So if you're going to be buying this for a pistol, buy it at your own discretion. You might love it, in which case I really hope you do. For $500, I'd much rather buy the older version, the 507 or the 508, which already comes with a pick rail mount. Yes, it's open in the back, but it's not only lighter, but also much less expensive. The 507 goes for around $300, the 508 for like around $340, $350. And they come in a lot lighter than this as well. I believe they're 1.5 and 2 ounces respectively. That's where my money would go personally. But if you still plan on buying this and putting it on a carbine, and you're going to magnify it, just keep in mind the reticle is not going to be that sharp, and the top third or half the image is going to leave you disappointed. Other than that, it functions like a HOLOSUN should, and that's great. And it honestly does feel fantastic in hand. I just really wish that the reticle was sharper and that there was no deformation to the image, because then it might just be worth the extra money and wait. Anyway, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you very much for watching. See you again next time. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you, this wouldn't be possible.